Hear you. Are you muted?
I there
Very
we go. Excellent. So how are you doing today?
I'm well. What about you?
Oh, I'm living the dream, man. Just give me
Right.
just give me 1 second here. I need to make sure that we're okay. The recording already started, so excellent.
How long are we going to be on?
Uh 30 minutes to an hour in there somewhere, if that's all right.
What do you got?
No big deal. Just wanted to chat really. Talk about how you got into this crazy business and a little bit of, leading up to that, where you're at in your childhood, how basically how you got where you are, and
All right.
what made you successful where you are, I guess, is the moral of the story.
Got it.
So I guess you were first on my radar back in, I'm gonna say it was the close to 2000, earlier 2000s range. I bumped into you once or twice at a SHOT Show. I don't expect you to
Right.
remember that. You have thousands of customers. So
True.
we're talking about the 300 blackout stuff. So that's how you got on my radar. So
That probably was about a 2011. Well, it started out, I worked in law enforcement. I was the gun guy. I worked in law enforcement for 25 years. 20 of those years, I was firearms instructor, range manager, the armorer, the pretty much gun guy for the agency. The last 12 years, I did crime scene investigations, but I was always that guy that had to be busy. So, in addition to the full-time career there, I was working in dive stores. I worked as a lifeguard. I was doing firearms training. I'd have 2 or 3 part-time jobs at a time, as well as the full-time job. In about 2000, 2001, I got asked by Ernie Emerson of Emerson Knives to help them out and work part-time for them, doing training, doing shows, everything else. And that's where I really got on the radar for the industry, was working SHOT Show, working Blade Show, all the different knife shows for Emerson Knives.
interesting. So what the Emerson knife stuff, when you talk about the training, what kind of training was that exactly?
Everything from teaching people how to sell, how to buy, doing the knife training with Ernie, pretty much everything that Emerson does. And
All right.
about 2002, I was in Atlanta for Blade Show, and I'm on top of Stone Mountain taking pictures. Turns out I'm pretty good with a camera. And I remembered that I had bought 2 silencers from this little company in Atlanta. And so I got to a payphone and looked up Advanced Armament Corporation in the phone book. They still had those back then. And I called them up and said, "Hey, you have no idea who I am. I'm just a simple customer. I bought an M4 2000 and a Evolution 9. They're currently in paperwork and I'm waiting on them. But I happen to be in Atlanta for something entirely different. Would you mind if I stopped by and said hi?" And the guy says, "Absolutely. Here's our address. Come on by." It was in Lithburn. And so I drive down there. I go to this little office in a group of offices. Guy answers the door and he's polishing up a silencer tube while we're talking. And he's like, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'd called." He says, "You're John?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm Kevin. Come on in." And Kevin and I sat and talked for about 2.5 hours about everything that we liked in the world except for guns or silencers. We talked motorcycles, we talked knives, we talked MMA. Turns out he was a very early sponsor of MMA, real big in the MMA organizations. And he was Forrest Griffin's first sponsor when Forrest Griffin was still sleeping on couches. If you watch that Forrest Griffin Bonner fight, there's actually an AAC logo on Forrest Griffin's shorts, and Kevin still has those shorts. So we really hit it off talking about all this different stuff. And it turns out Kevin's really big into knives. So I told him I was there for Blade Show. He didn't even know what was going on. He kind of loses track of stuff like that. And we started seeing each other at knife shows, at SHOT Show. Starting in 2005, I started working the range for him at the silencer shoots that AAC was doing. And then one day he called me up and said, "Hey man, you still working at the PD?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "How long have you been there?" I tell him. He's like, "Damn." And he goes, "Well, when can you retire?" And I said, "Well, I can retire right now if I wanted to, but I'm still a young man. I need to find a job." And he's like, "Okay, you're hired." And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "I want you to work for me." And I said, "Well, okay, what do you want me to do for you?" And he goes, "I don't care." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "I don't care. I want you to come work for me." And I said, "Okay." And that's how
That's
I
an
got hired.
unusual. What are you
Yeah, it
gonna
was
do? I have no idea.
exactly. At one point, kind of a funny side story to it, he says, "Anything else we need to do to get you working here?" And I said, "Well, I guess we should talk about insurance and pay." And he goes, "Yeah, we have insurance. You're going to have to talk to Lindsay about that." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, "What do you want for pay?" I said, "Well, I'd like to make at least what I'm making now with overtime and everything else." And he goes, "What's the number?" So I gave it to him and he goes, "Okay, fine." I go, "What?" And he said, "You asked for a number. I gave it to you. What else?" And I said, "Well, I feel like I should ask for more." He goes, "Too late for that." And the next thing you know, I'm working for Advanced Armor Corporation. And I was at that time the sales manager, to which I told him, I, I'm not really a sales guy. And he says, "I've seen you at every knife show and SHOT Show and everything else. You're plenty sales guy. You'll be fine." And worked there for quite a while. Um, love working for Advanced Armor Corporation. We did a lot of stuff there. We developed 300 Blackout. Uh, One of the really, really cool things for me was seeing 300 Blackout from, "Hey, we're going to do this," to it being out in the public, and I'd go to the bookstore and I'd look on the shelf at all the different magazines, and whenever I'd see a company or a article about 300 Blackout, I'd giggle like a little girl. And I'd go to shows and people were like, you know, "What is that?" And I go, "It's 300 Blackout." And they'd be like, "What does that do?" And I'd have to try to explain what 300 Blackout was. And then the real transition was when people came up and said, "I love 300 Blackout." And I'm like, "I know, me too." And, trying to explain it at hunting shows. And, I'd talk about 300 Blackout and people go, "I don't get it." And I'd go, "Okay, well, do you have a 12 gauge?" And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "Okay, if you want to go bird hunting, what ammo would you use?" And they go, "Well, I'd use birdshot." And I said, "Okay, if you're hunting hogs in heavy brush, would you do like buckshot?" And they go, "Sure." I go, "If you see a deer at 100 yards, what are you going to use?" And they go, "A slug." I said, "So what you're saying is you can change the capability of the firearm by tailoring the ammunition to what you want to do." And they go, "Yeah." And I go, "That's 300 Blackout. It's, subsonic. You can be very quiet with a silencer, or you can hit 23 to 33% harder than 5.56 out of the same barreling." And they'd be like, "I get it." And, after that, I got contacted by SIG and they asked me to come over to help start up their silencer division. And that's where I'm at now.
Excellent. Yeah, the 300 Blackout kind of hooked me with that short barrel length and still being able to burn most of that powder, in just 9 or 10 inches without leaving a big fireball at the end of the gun, basically.
Right. Yeah. And
So
That's
Go
another
ahead.
one that people don't understand. When we were developing 300 Blackout, it was for a specific customer. And, when we get to, it's a 9-inch barrel, the customer specified that they wanted a gun that was no bigger than an MP5 SD, that it be no louder than an MP5 SD with subsonic ammunition, that it be no heavier than an MP5 SD, which is a heavy gun. And they also wanted it to have the capability of an AK-47, the distance, the hitting hard enough, etc. So that's what we did. And when we were trying to figure out what barrel length it should be, since we had the requirement of the sound, it had to be no louder than MP5 SD, which is 124, 125 dB. We started with the overall silencer to get it to that sound. Then we had a length requirement, which was the MP5 SD. So if we took that silencer and we subtracted that amount of space with an AR platform, that left us with a 9-inch barrel. And that's where the whole 9-inch barrel length came from. And we were still 2 pounds lighter than an MP5 SD with an optic on it.
Well, and the original one, if I'm not mistaken, was with that SDN6 can. So that was not a light can either.
No,
To still be lighter than that MP5 is kind of crazy.
absolutely. Yeah, the 762 SDN6, now that I don't work for the company and the company doesn't really exist right now, the N6 stood for the customer, but it's a cut down 762 SD, miraculous can. I think just about everybody who was
Oh,
into silencers at that time owns one.
yeah, I still have one. It's just a monster. I
It's
don't think
it's
you're ever
the
going to kill it.
SUV.
So
Yeah, it's the SUV of silencers. You can't kill that thing.
I sent mine out to a company locally here to they're going to cut the end off, I guess, and replace the mount
Mhm.
with a chemo mount, so
Right.
that it, because all the other cans that I have picked up recently are all dead air cans. So they, I guess, supposedly have done really good work. I'm fingers crossed, because it's a
I've
lot of
heard things. I've heard really good things. I just had a guy get a hold of me last night. He's got a worn out latch on the can on his N6. And I said, well, one option for you is to get a hold of this other company and have them replace the mount for your can. And he had never heard of that before.
well, the crazy thing is, I got down that path because I went to buy another mount for another gun and realized that they're selling for, like, give or take, $300 a piece now, since AAC isn't around anymore.
$300 to
So
$500 a piece. Not kidding.
yeah, that's crazy.
I agree.
So so to backspace a little bit, how did you, I understand you were had kind of a military family. You kind of lived all over the place growing up. So
I grew up around the world.
where did it start for you? Where were you actually hatched, I guess, originally?
Well, I was born in embarrassing. I was born in Massachusetts. My mother was from Massachusetts. My father was from Texas. The original odd couple, I think I called them in an article. Um, and from when I was born until I joined the PD, we traveled every 2 to 3 years, mostly 2 years. We would pick everything up we owned and move out. And I
What
lived in,
was I was gonna say,
what's
was
that?
that a function of like a military family,
It
or was
was.
it
My father was
okay?
in the Air Force at the time. He was originally in the Navy, which is where he met my mother. And then he realized that a farm boy from Texas who can't swim probably doesn't belong in the Navy. And Jan transferred over to the Air Force. And we lived in Turkey. We lived in Iran. I lived in Iran for 3 years before
That's
the
kind of
Shah
cool.
abdicated. Lived in Florida, Virginia, Colorado, Texas, pretty much everywhere every
Wow,
two
you were
years.
not kidding.
Yeah, not kidding. So in the unit my father was in, there was only so many people, and you'd pick up, you'd move, and you'd see somebody from 3 deployments ago that you knew. So you had to be able to make friends quick because you only had 2 years and you kept them. And it was before the internet, obviously. So you'd see him again in 6 years someplace, something like that.
Yeah, I try to explain that to people. My story was not as crazy all over the world as yours, but similar. My dad was in the Air Force, so we, in the United States, went from base to base, and you people don't understand that, when you're a kid and you just get dumped into a new school every so often, like you said, you have to adapt basically,
Right.
or I was the other way. Unfortunately, I was one of those kids that didn't adapt so well, so I ended up, picked on. But I have to say honestly, today I think that bullying made me stronger than I would have been otherwise. So
Right. Well, and I would say that my moving around and me having to make friends quickly in new places pretty much created who I am today. That I am who I am, and I like to talk to people, and I like to make new friends.
there you go. So what are you doing? You said you're heading the silencer division at SIG.
I
Tell me a little more about that. Oh, it was okay.
yes. So I got the silencer division off of the ground. A few years ago, I was offered. One of the nice things about working in a large company like SIG is you can always move around. And while I'm still the silencer guy at SIG, one of my passions is teaching. And being that firearms instructor for 20 years, being a member of ILFE, which is the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors, and I'd occasionally teach at their training programs. And that's what I did at AAC, was teach, was to explain things to people. And I got the opportunity about 3 years ago at SIG to become one of the two national sales trainers for SIG. I teach everything. I teach pistols, rifles, silencers, optics, air guns, pretty much everything about the company. I get to teach distributors, dealers, consumers. I travel around doing different shows and speaking with people and answering their questions.
That's kind of neat.
It's a
kind
great
of
job.
Well, and besides just teaching, I'm sure plenty of it is, the firearms advocacy stuff in general too. So
Absolutely. I work with SAMI. I work with the American Suppressor Association. There's a lot of balls in the air, and yeah, just being able to go out and go to dealers and teach their employees about SIG products, about silencers, about whatever it is that they have questions on or need help on, and getting to interface with the customers. It's really my dream job. And I'm also still the silencer guy, so I still work with customer service, all the different sales guys, anything that they need to do with silencers, I kick in and help that out. It's a
so
special, but in order to be a really good silencer guy, you got to be a really, really good gun guy.
agreed.
Be like being the muffler guy at a car shop and not knowing about cars. You wouldn't really do anything, but
So just to put this all into perspective, I mean, I don't want to, make you blush or anything, but you're obviously a fairly prolific figure. Everybody recognizes that face and that beard pretty much in this industry at this point. So if you had to pick, say, 4 or 5, just, I want to say bullet points, but that's cheesy, but 4 or 5 things that you've done in your life, or that you say habits that you have that got you to this point where you're that guy, what would you say it would be?
well, again, being that gun guy it was the foundation for it, and my personality and my ability to talk to people and to make friends, and um, you know, so there's an author, and his name is David Morrell. I don't know if you know who David Morrell is, but he wrote Rainbow, not Rainbow, Rambo, and I got to work with him a little bit. We worked with him at Emerson Knives. He was writing a book called The Protector, which had a lot to do with knife fighting. So we got him into a class. We broke his scapula. We had a great time. And he was one of my favorite authors when I was growing up. And I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to him for about a week and discuss everything in life. So it's one of those, this is one of my literary heroes, and I get to talk to him for a week. At the end of that week, I told him, look, I really want to thank you for not being an asshole and, blowing what I had imagined you to be. And he said, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I try to take to is I try to treat everybody like I want to be treated. And I have a personality in the industry, but I don't take it too seriously. I'm just a guy, and everybody around me knows that whenever it comes up, my first thing I talk about is I'm just John. I'm just a dude, and I just happen to had a lot of really cool jobs and a lot of really cool experiences, and I can relate them. So as far as bullet points, great foundation in firearms, a great foundation in personality, and trying not to get into a fight with everybody I meet. Um, Help folks out. I always try to help everybody out, no matter what it is. And
At some point,
just be
I was gonna
yourself.
say, at some point, you and maybe this is just me, but you almost get to a point where you enjoy isn't the right word. Maybe crave being that guy that everybody comes to when they have a question. It gets to a point where it's almost addictive. So
It kind of is. And I had to turn off my phone because my phone rings 24 hours a day, messaging. I'm connected in every possible way, from Instagram to I get emails. It never stops, and I love it. I remember once at a AAC, I was sitting home and I was watching a movie at 2 o'clock in the morning, and somebody sent me a text, I think it was, or an email, and I answered their question. He's like, "What are you doing up?" And I'm like, "I don't sleep a lot. I enjoy the interaction and the helping people."
and
Like
you've
you
got
said,
stuff to do.
yeah, I crave it.
Yeah, I never really would have thought. I work in a totally different industry primarily. I'm in the IT industry, so I have been
God bless
the
you. The
gun.
world runs around IT right now.
Well, but I've been into guns same since I was a kid. So, and everybody knows that. So I don't talk about it at work, but even at work in like Palo Alto, people kind of figure it out and they gravitate towards me when they have questions. Like when the pandemic started, they were all desperate to figure out, what they could do gun wise, etc., where they could buy them, find ammo, etc. So so I've sort of been that gun guy for my kind of sector of the world. So
Right. Well,
and
you bring up
good.
something, if I could add it, is that during the beginning of this pandemic, it pretty much took our training world and turned it upside down. Because if you walked into a gun store anytime in the last year, there's a line out the door. The employees are just hand over fist trying to help people as quick as they can. And there's no time for training.
Yeah.
So we've been struggling with what can we do. And one of the things that I did was, for 3 or 4 months, I was at our SIG's store, which is our pro shop at the SIG Academy. Um, and I got to really pitch in and help out one-on-one with the customers and getting them to what they wanted. And there was a different type of customer that came in than I'm used to when I go into a store, because for the last 3 years, when I go in and I work a store, it's somebody who knows about guns, probably already has one, has an idea of what they're looking for. They know the difference between single action only, double, single, striker fired versus hammer fired. But the pandemic has really brought in your mom, who is looking to buy her first gun, and she's walked to a gun store for the first time and is scared. They don't know what to expect when they walk in. They're more into going into a bakery, but to have somebody who is there to help them out, going, it's okay, I'm going to explain all this, and we're going to walk you through everything, and you're going to pick what you want, and you're going to go walk out with your gun and take it home. And that was a whole new type of refreshing for me.
So the training aspect of it though, during the pandemic, I know up north there you had quite a, I don't know about Massachusetts or places specifically like that, but where I'm from is Pennsylvania. There was a whole new level of kind of lockdown for that area. So how did that, figure with your training? I mean, did you get more stuff done that was virtual, to start, or did you still have the flow of people in and out?
Well, we struggle with even doing the virtual, which we had thought about and tried to get going, but the employees are going so quickly in the stores with the different people, they don't have time to train.
Gotcha.
So we started picking up other different things that we could do. Recently, my group, there's 10 of us, and we do armor training for different stores. So we'll go in and find time for the employees to do 3 or 4 armors classes so that they can help the customer when they come in and they can't figure out why this is happening or why that is happening. The training aspect has been a struggle. It absolutely has. One of the things that we did, Joe Ryan, one of the guys that I worked with, really put together some really good mini series, as we're calling them. And we went and did some classes that were, congratulations, you bought a gun. This is how it works. This is how you should store it. This is, you're brand new to firearms. Here's a class. And we got an amazing amount of great feedback from those classes because, again, we have like 8 million people who just bought their first gun for their household. And in those classes, we were having entire families showing up to learn about it.
Yeah, it's definitely something that, like you said, reaching out to that sector of people that wouldn't normally be buying guns and making sure that they at least get the basic training so that they understand what they're doing is, I would say, critically important at this point, right? So I'm not obviously at your level, but just running like municipal ranges and stuff on the weekends, I've seen some horrifying things. People
Well,
that you've had to, yeah.
you've got folks that have never owned or touched a firearm in their life. They go buy one and now they stare at it on their kitchen table like, now what do I do with that? And that's one of the reasons we started that mini series, was to start with, okay, you bought the gun, this is how you take it out of the box, and we take them out on the range and have them shoot during that 4 or 5 hour period. There, it's not gun sight, but it's an inoculation that they understand that it's not an evil feature and they're not going to hurt themselves or someone else with it.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a different world. So
Right.
so what's next for you? Where do you see yourself going after this?
Really good
Within
question.
SIG, or
What's that?
is it within SIG, or is it?
So every year we have an evaluation. I'm sure you have one also.
Yeah.
And in the last couple of years, it's, part at the end of it, your boss says, all right, so where do you want to be? What can we do to facilitate you getting where you want to be? I don't want to be that guy, but I'm okay. I love what I do. When we're not in the middle of the COVID, I am typically in 1 to 2 states a week, talking to people, training folks, talking guns with people. I love what I do. During the COVID, it's now like once a month that I get to go someplace and teach folks. This next month, I've actually got several different things going. I'll be doing some training at the armories down in Florida. We got 3 different locations, and on March 20th, 320, I'm going to be at Frog Bones over in Melbourne, Florida. And so it's starting to pick up a little bit more. And of course, Florida being Florida, they are more open to events down there.
I was gonna say, Florida being Florida, there'll be more
Right.
people out running around. So
Exactly.
that's kind of funny. Well, that's awesome.
It
So
is weird when I go down to Florida, you go to a restaurant, like everybody's just there. And it's like, this is weird.
I'm not near Atlanta. I'm about an hour north of Atlanta,
Mhm.
and
I
it's
love
pretty much
Atlanta.
like that. Yeah, it's pretty much like that here. It's like like there really isn't a pandemic anymore at this point. So the only thing you notice are the plexiglass shields in front of everything.
Right. Well, and SIG took the pandemic very seriously. We all got boxes of masks, and whenever we were at our pro shop, we used precautions, etc.
Mhm.
That's why when you go to someplace different and you look around, you're like, wow. But they're not having the real big problems that other places are. They're not packed as tightly.
So
By the way,
you
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 said something
mentioned
earlier. I'm not in Massachusetts. We're in New Hampshire.
you're in
Live
New
free or
Hampshire.
die. Yes.
There you go.
I don't
You
go to
yeah.
Massachusetts unless it's the airport. I'm probably wanted in Massachusetts.
Just because of what you are. Anyway,
Right.
so you mentioned motorcycles earlier. Are you what other kind of hobbies do you have? Or I mean, I shouldn't say call it a hobby because I don't know about you. For me, motorcycle is mostly just how I get where I'm going. But
Right.
but but how did you get into the motorcycle thing?
Cheaper transportation when you're a kid.
There it is.
So I bought my first motorcycle when I was in high school. I wrecked my first motorcycle when I was in high school. I drove cross country twice, once on a 64 Harley Panhead, once on a Honda Nighthawk. Drove from Florida to Georgia, all the way out to California, back to LA, back down to San Diego, and straight back across. I grew up around motorcycles as much as I grew up around guns.
Kind of funny how similar that story is. Yeah, no, my grandpa it wasn't the Air Force then, it was the Army Air Corps.
Yep.
But he came back from Korea, and the first thing that he did was buy a motorcycle, and he and my grandmother were all over the country on that thing. It was an old 49 Panhead, and he kept it running until I was probably 16, 17 in high school, when he ended up he had to give up his pilot's license and everything. He had really, really bad arthritis to the point that he couldn't even grip the steering wheel of a car anymore. So it was kind of a sad story watching him, sell his airplane and sell the motorcycle and just settle into working. He did taxes in the end, and he just had basically these two fingers. He could type on the keyboard to keep himself going, but
Nice.
he had to keep busy though. He couldn't stop moving,
Same thing.
even through all that. But I was 6 years old, I think, when he got me on the back of that motorcycle, and I never got it out of my blood since. So
Yeah. Do love
my
motorcycles. As I get
and
older, I'll probably get onto a tricycle.
there you go. My wife says if I bring home another motorcycle, I'm gonna have to sleep with it in the garage. So
Perfect.
so what else I heard you mentioned diving in there somewhere.
I used to do a lot of scuba diving. I worked in dive shops, went through dive instructor school, but never followed through with that. Back in like 92, I was going to quit, leave the US, and go down to Australia and do dive instruction in Australia. Just never got to that point.
That's
Up
an
here in the
interesting.
great Northeast, there's not a lot of scuba diving to be done.
Well, I mean, you can, but it's not quite as brilliant a thing to see, I assume.
Right. And one of my other loves, which goes into hand in hand with the job that I have, is I love to travel. And, I've been to 49 of 50 states. The only one I haven't been to is Alaska, so I need to get into that. I had a trip to Africa lined up for this past June, but of course, COVID put a kink in that. So at some point when everything settles down some, I'm probably going to head over to Africa. A couple of friends of mine want to go with me to Tokyo.
So you haven't made it to Alaska. I'm just curious. Are you also, besides being a gun guy, are you a hunter at all, or not really so much?
I'm a hunter light. I really enjoy deer hunting. I don't do it that often. Most of what I do is going out and killing invasive hogs.
And there are plenty of those around. Holy cow.
Plenty of those around. Yep, all over. I
That
think
there's
they're in like 48 states, I think it is.
it's the bad thing. Some of them that you run into are so, I don't want to say disgusting, but like so bad that you don't even want to eat them. So in some places they're not like that, but down a lot of the ones down south in Atlanta here, around Atlanta, you don't even want to eat them. They're gamey and kind of gross.
So
Yeah.
like in Florida, what we used to do is we would go kill the hogs and then we'd throw them off in the canals for the gators. And then we'd come back during gator season and you get bigger
There you go.
recycling.
Recycling. Oh, all right. Well, I guess I don't have any more questions. Is there anything that you are interested in talking about? Anything?
Well, we've got our new Mod X cans out right now. This is the Mod X9. This actually can be broken down by baffle. Each baffle is about
Each baffle?
each baffle. This
Wow.
one's actually brand new, so I don't have the tools here to pull it apart, but you just unscrew the baffles and reconfigure it into a shorter configuration if you want to. ATF says we can't make it longer than it was papered as, but you can make it shorter. So in the full configuration, that one will get you with subsonic ammunition and 9mm, will get you about 128 dB, which is pretty spectacular. But let's say you're going to use a smaller gun like a SIG 938 or a 365, any of the little 9mm out there that you can get a thread barrel for. You don't necessarily want that huge silencer on the end of it. So you could break it down to 3 or 4 baffles, where in the full configuration of 7 baffles, you're going to get about 128 dB. I can knock it down to 3 baffles and get down to 140 dB or 139 dB, which is hearing safe.
I was gonna say that's still pretty impressive for something that short. Holy cow!
Not kidding, and it looks really cool. But
Now,
we just got the 9mm out. The 45 is next. Those are pretty much 90% printed, additive manufacturing. Where we're just having the baffles printed, some secondary machining, and then they just screw together. We made a change. So this is the first time I've mentioned this on videos, but while you can pull this apart and you can put the baffles in any configuration, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but on the edge there the baffles are numbered. We actually found the dirty secret in the industry with handgun silencers is that while a rifle silencer will typically cut your group in half, a handgun silencer, the best you can typically hope for is it doesn't make your group any worse. And in rifle silencers, we typically wire EDM the bore of the silencer to make sure that it's straight with the barrel. So we are actually wire EDMing these so that in the configuration where it's 1 through 7, you've got the silencer wired all the way through, so it's absolutely perfectly straight. So you get a very, very accurate handgun silencer.
that is really neat. That's yeah, it's not something I even would have thought of. So
Yeah.
the how is it just traditional direct thread, or what's the mounting like for that guy?
So on handguns, we use a thing called a piston, and let me see if I can pull this apart real quick. The piston, what it does, there was a guy named Mickey Finn that figured out that a Browning tilting barrel design handgun, which is pretty much every handgun in your collection, Glocks, 1911, SIGs, all of those use a Browning tilting barrel design. And what happens is as the slide goes to the rear under recoil, you'll see that the end of the barrel, the chamber end of the barrel drops down. That's why if you lock a Glock to the rear, it looks like the barrel is sticking in the air. But that's the way the recoil system works. Well, it's got to lift that silencer to do that. And the more weight you have on there, think of like a seesaw. If I put a little kid on the bottom of a seesaw and I put a bigger kid up here, what happens? All right. So when I put a silencer on the end of the barrel, it tries to pull down on the end of the barrel and the chamber end can't drop. And that's why when you fire it, it'll only fire one shot and you've got to hand cycle it. So there's a thing in there called a piston. The piston is surrounded by a spring. And when the piston is attached to the barrel, as the gases go into the silencer, they hit the baffles, which is like an umbrella in the wind, and it pulls the silencer forward, and it floats that silencer on the end of the gun just that long so the gun can cycle. And so you get that regular cycle that we come to enjoy. So that's what's in there in the back and the backside. And 95% of all well-made silencers on the market have that today.
Well, that's, yeah, absolutely. Getting that explanation on video for the end users is great. What I was more referring to though is, do you have like a for this silencer that has the, you know, the configuration where you can shorten it, etc. Do you also have like a 3-lug adapter or something like that that would make it
We
easier to
don't
use it?
use the 3-lug adapter. And I apologize. And the piston, the
Oh
back
no,
end of
you're
the
good.
piston is what threads onto the barrel. So this is a direct thread using that piston. 3-lug was developed by H&K for mounting of a what do you call it? Blank firing adapter onto the submachine gun. It was never meant to mount a silencer. Matter of fact, if you look at the old Navy guns, you'll see that there's a 3-lug adapter to the end of the gun, but there's also threads. And that's because the silencer threaded onto the threads while the blank firing adapter attached via the 3-lug. The 3-lug by H&K was good enough that you could actually put a 3-lug adapter onto your silencer and attach it, and it worked out really great. It was a byproduct of having it available. You know, the silencer industry is always adapting to what the gun industry is doing. So the problem is that there's a lot of these clones that are out there. And I just talked to a guy on Facebook the other day because he threaded his piston onto his MP5 clone, and the threads were out of spec and didn't go all the way to the bottom. There was still about a couple of 100 thou at the bottom where the threads were sticking out the bottom. And he said, well, everybody keeps telling me to go to a 3-lug adapter. And I go, well, if the threads are that far out of spec, I'm
There
pretty
you go.
willing to bet that the 3-lug adapter is not very well at all. In some of those clones, when you put a silencer on the end of it, you can actually move the silencer, which is bad. And I've seen end cap strikes on 45 caliber silencers on 9mm guns because of how much it moves.
That's a good point. It's kind of similar problem space to the, you know, putting silencers on AKs thing is the, you know, you never know really whether it's concentric to the bore or not. So
funny story about that. I was talking with, I can't remember his name right now, Jacob Herman, who used to work for Century. And I said, Jacob, what percentage of AKs have concentric bores? And I always ask this of people who build AKs too. And Jacob said 283. And I go, what? And he said, there's about 283 of them. We built them specifically for a customer. But yeah, other than that, no.
yeah, not a percentage, just 283.
Yeah. And if you look at the Wolverine by Dead Air, it's got a removable end cap on it because you're going to hit it at some point and have to replace it.
Yeah, that's crazy. But yeah, I didn't even think about that problem space in the HK clone world, because like you said, not all MP5 clones are created equal, that's for certain.
If it was just HK MP5s, they adhere very much to their TDP and they do great machining. But the problem is when you've got, and I don't want to cast stones at particular companies, but you know, they're being made elsewhere and they're not really holding to a TDP.
That absolutely makes sense. And now that you mention it, I have seen, you know, 3-lug adapters that don't seem to fit terribly well also. So,
Right.
And especially when you're going for sort of a precision with a can like that to begin with, I guess it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and it can be a problem. And then, you know, so I'll give you an example that when I worked at AAC and work here at SIG, I've never had them charge anybody for a repair ever. I don't care what it is. And in my classes, I tell people, if you get an end cap strike, call customer service. We're going to get it in. We're going to repair it. We're going to take care of it. It's going to be awesome. If you happen to get a second strike, we're going to talk about it and figure out what the problem is. But we're going to fix it. If you get a third one, you get a personal phone call from me to figure out what's going on. But we'll fix your can. It's not a problem. That's our warranty. You break it, we fix it.
That was one nice thing with AAC is, I mean, I've never actually had a baffle strike or anything, but I've had a couple of those, you know, latches go bad over the years and stuff like that. And basically anytime I've ever called them, like you said, it was amazing because they said, okay, we're going to send you a box with a label, put the can in it, and a week later the thing shows up back at your house as if it were completely refurbished, brand new, and they didn't charge me anything.
Right. And when I started with AAC, there was stuff in the repair rack that had been there a year, not kidding. This is the Wayback Machine. And I had them move it into my office so I could monitor when stuff was being repaired. And we got it down to a couple of months. You have to stop production to do repairs. I hired a guy named Paul Van Wagner. Paul, if you're out there, hi. He's an IT guy too. And he got it down to about a week. You know, somebody would have a problem with their can. He would get them to send it back in, and he would dog that thing through the system to make sure it got repaired and right back out to the guy. Repairs are extremely important. That's a guy has got an investment in this thing, and we want to make sure that it's repaired, it's in good shape, and it's back to him.
Well, and it absolutely is. And I'm just happy. I don't want to say happy. That's not the right way to say this, but the fact that AAC isn't in business anymore really worried me, but I'm happy now that I know that there are people that have that skill set that can repair these things outside of that chain. I didn't realize that was a thing until just recently. So
yeah, there's always a way. And AAC was a great company, and I was very sorry to see him go. Hopefully the company that bought the IP will be bring him back online. It'd be really nice to see.
That was my hope also. Fingers crossed. I guess it was the holding company from PSA is who ended
The
up
holding
with that
company
stuff.
that owns PSA. They own several different things out there, but I'm really hoping that they can get it moving forward and bring it back to what it was.
So what else do you have going on that we need to tell these people about before we wrap up?
The new rifle cans are being produced right now. We've got some contractual obligations to get those out for some military government customers first. But as soon as we get through with those, they'll be coming out on the commercial market. Complete new technology, also additive manufacturing produced. Very exciting stuff.
All right. Well, I look forward to that. And thank you very much, sir. It was nice to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
Yep. Have a good
Anytime.
day. Bye-bye.